it was through. But since when has impossible ever stopped you? And Friday's disappointment and Sunday's empty tomb. Since when has impossible ever stopped you? This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. Got you like a fire, stirring something new. And you're not gonna run out of miracles anytime soon. Yeah, resurrection power can run in our face too. We believe there's a way for miracles right now with you. Oh, this is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is a praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. Oh, yeah. Gonna live just as the stone that was rolled at the tomb in the garden. What happens when God turns to mud? I feel Him moving it now. I feel Him doing it now. I feel Him doing it now. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is a praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. Oh, I'll live, gonna live again.
What a fantastic way to kick off the service. And we're going to keep it going, but before we do, my name is Shane and I'll be your online host for today. And if this is your first time joining us, make sure you click connect with us on our website to stay up to date on all things happening here at North Point. Speaking of what's happening, have you checked out Summer with North Point yet? Because if not, go check it out right now. We've got some pretty cool events taking place this summer, including mountain biking, scavenger hunts, movie nights, and this coming Saturday, Upstreet is having a kickball game with dads to celebrate Father's Day. So head on over to the site, check it out, and come join me and my kids as we try to show off our kickball skills this Saturday. Now, I'm pumped about today's service, as our lead pastor Buck is kicking off a brand new series called You're Not the Boss of Me. Listen, if your emotions have ever gotten the best of you like they have me, then this series is for you. But before we hear from Buck, here's Jamie and Taylor to keep things going with the song called Who You Say I Am.
Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I miss being with you here at North Point, but I'm thankful for the internet and technology and the ways that it's still able to bring us together as the church. And what crazy times we are living in. I turn on the news every morning and something is different. But one thing that I am very thankful for is the fact that we have good news that we can cling to, that shapes our tomorrow. It stays the same. Jesus Christ, what he has done for us, that we have freedom in him. And because of that, we sing today.
Who am I that the highest king should welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken, 'cause I am what you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am what you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken, 'cause I am what you say I am. You are for me, not against me, 'cause I am what you say I am. I am what you say I am. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Weary but a wanderer, there is rest for thee at the feet of Jesus in his love so free. Listen to his message, words
A big part of our mission, leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus, is not just what happens here in our community, but also what we believe God has called us to do on the other side of the world with Mosaic, our global engagement ministry. As I'm sure you've guessed, in response to the global pandemic, everything in Kenya was shut down, including the orphanage at Fountain of Life Church that we have partnered with for a while now. This is a big deal. As many of you know, we have dozens of sponsored orphans who live in this home full time. As a result, Pastor James, our partner of Fountain of Life, took it upon himself to find temporary housing for all of the kids by reaching out to extended family, church members, and others in their community who are willing to take the kids in until they can reopen their home. To help in these challenging times, we've sent funds to be used to not only provide food for the kids who have been relocated, but also for the families they are staying with, as many of them already deal with extreme poverty. We have also helped supply cell phones in order to provide a way for Pastor James and his wife to maintain relationship with these kids since they've had to close their home. It's difficult for us to imagine just how challenging the situation has been for all of them. But because of your support, you have helped provide a way to ensure these kids are being fed. You've helped give James and his wife a way to stay in touch with their kids. And on behalf of James and his wife and all of these children that you have helped take care of, I want to say thank you. When you choose to financially support North Point, you aren't just helping be for people here in Central Texas. You are being for people on the other side of the world. You are helping to build what is now a decade-long relationship with Fountain of Life Church. You are helping to put in place the infrastructure needed to create jobs in their community and ultimately helping to show the love of Jesus to the people in their community. So thank you for your generosity. I know it comes at a cost, but it is truly impacting so many lives here and on the other side of the world.
About 3 months ago, I was having a conversation with my father-in-law, which is Jill's dad, and he asked me if I would be willing to sell his 2 Harleys that have been sitting in his garage for the last 5 years. And I looked at him and I said, sure, I'd love to, because one of those Harleys is a 1999 Sportster 1200 with screaming eagle pipes. It's amazing looking. And the other Harley is right here. And this is a 2004 Electra Glide, and this is so big and so powerful. And so we said, sure, or I said, yeah, I'd love to. And so we brought the Harleys home, and the boys and I, put batteries in the Harleys. We changed the fluids, got everything ready. And then the moment came where we flipped the on switch and we hit start. And they fired up, and it was loud. It was powerful. It was such a cool moment. And so we took a bunch of pictures, put them online and all that good stuff. And they've been for sale for the last 3 months, but they haven't sold yet, which means they've been in my garage for 3 months. And here's what I've discovered is that you have to ride a motorcycle like at least 1 to 2 times a week, to keep them fresh and keep everything functioning. And so I thought to myself, well, why not volunteer? Why not me? I'd love to do this. And so over the last 3 months, I've been riding these things, and it's been amazing. In fact, when I go out and I ride this Harley right here, what's so cool, and I didn't really realize this, is that when you're on something like this big and this powerful, and you're just kind of outside, you're not in a car, you're just outside, it feels amazing because it's like you're just one with nature and it's just all coming at you and you can look around and it's just been awesome. And then, the wind is blowing in my hair, which is kind of an odd thing because my hair's already like this and, it doesn't really do much with a lot of hairspray, but it's a cool feeling of, the wind's in my hair and I'm like, this is great. And then over the last 3 months, I've decided to fully try to embrace this whole Harley thing. And so I have this jacket right here, which is my cool Old Navy denim jacket. It's not really a riding jacket, but for me, I've been putting this on and, wearing this when I ride. And then when you're riding the motorcycles, or if you ride, this, is that there's this like common kind of community, aspect with different riders. And when you pass a rider, they give you a sign. And I don't know what the sign is, but it's like an upside down peace sign. I think they're just saying like, hey, you're a fellow rider. And so I'm such a poser and I've just said, I'm going to play along. So everywhere I go, I'm just like upside down peace sign. Here you go. What's up, my fellow biker? And I'm just telling you, over the last 3 months, I've had so much fun and it's been absolutely awesome. And every time I get off this Harley and I put my feet on the floor and I pull my shoulders back, I feel taller. In fact, after riding this very powerful thing, guess what I feel? I feel powerful. I feel powerful. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Buck, what are you doing? Where are we going? Aren't we starting a new series? What does this have to do with what we're going to be talking about today? So, to explain that, let me tell you where we're going over the next several weeks. You see, for every single one of us, I think all of us have these powerful emotions. Regardless if you're a Christian or not, I think every single one of us have these powerful emotions that have the potential to control us. In other words, think of it this way, that for every one of us, we have powerful emotions that have the potential to have power over us. And guys, here's the deal. When I'm talking about these powerful emotions, I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm talking about these powerful emotions that kind of sneak up, or these powerful emotions that have the potential, or almost, if you will, kind of personifying them, they desire to have power over us. And when they get power over us, it leads to us saying things and doing things that we look back on and we think to ourselves, what in the world was I thinking? What in the world? Why in the world would I have ever done that? And it can lead to an enormous amount of regret. And we've all seen this. I mean, we've seen that individual who's allowed the powerful emotion of anger to have power over them. And all of a sudden, it's like we're on the other side of them and we're walking on eggshells. And it's like, man, I've got to be careful what I say and be careful what I do. I just can't be me around you. And because they're going to explode. And we've been on the other side of those explosions. And we've been on the other side of that powerful emotion of anger. And we have felt the hurt. We have felt the pain. We've all seen that. We've all seen and been on the other side of somebody who really has wrestled with that powerful emotion of greed. And it's so hard to see when it's you, but it's really easy to see on the other side of you. And that powerful emotion of greed, when it begins to have power over you, I mean, this is so dangerous because it begins to impact the way you see God and the church and money. It begins to kind of change your views on the poor and the oppressed. And now all of a sudden you're saying things about people who are poor and oppressed because it's greed, and greed is driving you. It's got control over you. We've all seen that individual with the powerful emotion of fear, and how fear has paralyzed them, how fear has robbed them of the joys and the adventure and the happiness in life. We've all seen that. And so over the next several weeks, we're going to be talking about these powerful emotions that have the potential to have power over us. And here's what I want to do for every single one of us. I want all of us to have this conversation and begin to look at things on the other side of these powerful emotions. Begin to see these emotions for what they really are. And ultimately, where I want us to all get to is a place to where we can have our Harley moment. A place where we can actually kind of step off this very powerful Harley and put our feet on the floor and pull our shoulders back and stand up tall and be able to say to these powerful emotions in our lives, you're not the boss of me. Anger, listen, you're not the boss of me. Fear, I see you and I see what's behind you. Fear, I want to let you know, you're not the boss of me. Lust, I can see you coming from a distance and I can see what you're all about. Lust, I want you to know you are not the boss of me. Because the reality is for you and for me is we don't have to be controlled by these emotions. In fact, there is a way forward for every single one of us to be free of these powerful emotions and experience something better in life. And so that's what we're going to be talking about over the next several weeks. Now, today, as we begin this whole discussion, I just want to lay a foundation for where we're going. And the way I want to lay this foundation is I want to talk about something that Jesus invites every single one of us into. And the thing that Jesus invites us into has been extraordinarily powerful for my life. It's been impactful in the way that I engage my friends, in the way that I lead, in the way that I parent. It's impacted so many arenas. It's been like a filter for my whole life. And it's so important for us to begin the discussion right here. And so the question is, what is it that Jesus invites us into or invites us to do with these powerful emotions? Well, to explain that, I want us to look at a story where Jesus is teaching this large crowd and his disciples are with him. So imagine this setting, large crowd, there's disciples. There's like Peter and there's Philip and Nathaniel and James and John, the guys, they're all around him. And so he's teaching this large crowd and that's the setting. And then look at what happens. All of a sudden, some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked. So Pharisees and teachers of the law, it's important to understand the context, that these are the individuals who were like at the pinnacle of the first century culture. These were the individuals who were the rich, and these were the individuals who were the brilliant. These were the individuals who were the highly educated. These were the individuals who had enormous amounts of power, religious influence, and power. And these guys, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they hated Jesus. And I don't think that's too strong of a word because ultimately, Jesus being in jail isn't satisfying. Ultimately, they hated him to the degree that they had him killed. That's how much they hated him. And do you know why they hated him? He threatened their way of life and he threatened their power. So one day, these Pharisees and teachers of the law, they come from Jerusalem. There's this huge crowd, Jesus' disciples, and they're extraordinarily upset. Well, what are they upset about? Well, we know. They asked Jesus, why do your disciples break the traditions of the elders? In other words, how could your disciples do this, Jesus? Now, we may read this and we're like, really? Like, what's the big deal? Tradition of the elders? What does that have to do with anything? So let me try to explain this. See, the tradition of elders is simply this. It's simply a supplemental ritual or tradition to help uphold or help you keep the written law of God. That's all the traditions of the elders are. For example, think about this. A tradition that we have to help us keep a command of God is a tradition of praying before meals. Maybe it's something you were brought up on. Maybe it's something that you've bumped into from time to time, but to pray before meals. Now, here's the deal. Praying before meals is not a command of God. It is simply a tradition to help supplement the command of God to pray continually, that you and I should pray. And when it comes to these traditions can get really, really strange, can't they? I mean, if you've experienced that in your life, we've seen this. In fact, with praying before meals, oftentimes I think about this tradition. I'm like, it's a little bit strange from time to time. Because think about it. Thinking about praying that God would bless an Oreo or that God would bless a Twinkie. Are you kidding me? Like, it's already blessed. It's delicious. And then this idea that God, please let it nourish our bodies. I'm not sure how an Oreo or a Twinkie is going to actually nourish your body. I think it just works against you, right? And so there's this thing that happens we do with traditions that oftentimes are strange. They can take on all these different forms. Now, hear me carefully. Listen, I think the tradition of praying before meals is wonderful. In fact, I do it all the time. I'm just giving you an example of these traditions that we have that are supplemental, that help supplement and help us keep the written law of God. That's their traditions of the elders. So the question becomes, well, what was such a big deal for these Pharisees and teachers of the law to come to Jesus with all this emotion? What are they upset about? What tradition? Well, we discover that right here. They don't wash their hands before they eat. Your disciples, Jesus, they don't wash their hands before they eat. How could they do this? Now, you and I read this and we're like, what? Like, what does this have to do with anything? And here's what's important to understand in the first century Jewish context. It was a command of God to be ceremonially clean before God. And so one of the supplemental things they would do would wash their hands, and the disciples didn't wash their hands and all these kind of things. And Jesus was hearing this, and Jesus is saying, hey, I'm going to have nothing to do with this, because Jesus knew that the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the day, that they were leveraging the traditions of the elders to have power and manipulate and control the people, that they were putting these traditions of the elders on par, traditions, rituals on par with the commands of God. And Jesus is saying, I'm going to have nothing to do with that. In fact, not only did Jesus say, I'm going to have nothing to do with it, Jesus leans hard against this. Jesus stands up against what they were doing. In fact, that's what we see. It continues. And it says, and why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition? I mean, Jesus looks at these guys and says, what are you doing? You're taking your traditions and you're leveraging them to break the command of God. And then Jesus gives them an example. He says, here's what you're doing. Like, the fifth commandment, this is the command of God, honor your father and mother. Well, you have these supplemental things, these traditions of the elders, these traditions and rituals that are actually keeping you from honoring your father and mother. And he gives them this big example. And then Jesus leans in and he continues and he says this. He says, you nullify. In other words, you completely miss the word of God for the sake of your tradition. And then look at this, you hypocrites, you hypocrites. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. Isaiah was a prophet who lived 700 years before Jesus and the Pharisees, before this moment. So what did Isaiah say about these Pharisees and religious leaders of the day? Well, Jesus continues and he tells us, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And Jesus is looking at these Pharisees going, guys, I see the games you're playing with the people. I see these religious games you're playing with the people to manipulate and control the people. In other words, I see the hypocrisy before my very eyes that you're honoring God with your lips, but your hearts are far from God. And guys, I think we've all seen that. I think perhaps one of the reasons why maybe you walked away from church or you walked away from faith is because you saw that. You saw that individual who sang all the right songs, who said all the right religious words, who even knew what like the synoptic gospels were and could explain all that stuff. But behind closed doors, or the way they treated you, or the way they treated people, it was clear to you that they honored God with their lips, but their hearts were far from God. And their hypocrisy was so apparent. And guys, if that bothers you, what you need to know is that bothered Jesus. In fact, he's calling it out. And he not only stops there, but Jesus keeps the gas down. He continues. And look at what he says. He says, listen and understand. Now, this is a big deal. These are Pharisees. They have been in a Jewish educational system since the time they were little boys to the age of 30. They have like triple PhDs. They were the smart of the smart. They were the brightest individuals in the culture. And Jesus says, listen and learn. How offensive. But he continues. He says, listen and learn. What goes into your mouth does not defile you, but what comes out of your mouth, that is what defiles you. Now, the word defile means at odds with God. That the things that you put into your body, these things, they don't put you at odds with God. But what comes out of you, what you're saying and what you're doing, Pharisees, that's what puts you at odds with God. And listen, here's what's important to know. Is that Jesus is standing before this crowd, before his disciples. And he's saying, Pharisees, teachers of the law, you religious leaders, you are at odds with God. Imagine that moment. No one has ever spoken like this to the religious leaders. The whole crowd is like, oh my gosh. The disciples are like, are you kidding me? And the Pharisees had had enough. And they walk away. And then you have Jesus and his disciples. And his disciples who just watched everything that happened. They came to Jesus and look at what they said. They came to him and asked, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this? Jesus, don't you know who these guys are? I mean, these are the religious leaders. These are the priests of the day. Like, your words are so offensive. You're pushing so hard against them. You are standing up in a way no one's ever stood up. Jesus, are you aware of the offense of that? And look at Jesus' response. He looks at the guys. He looks at Peter. He looks at John. He looks at James. And he says, leave them. Guys, leave them. They are blind guides. If the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit. Jesus is looking at his guys and he says, hey, they're leading you away from God because of their traditions and rituals. They're leading you away from God. I am here to lead you to God. They're leading you to a place to put you at odds with God. I am here to lead you to a place to give you peace with God. And then Peter, listening to all of this, and he's looking around and he's thinking and he's processing. Peter asked a very honest question of Jesus. Peter says, Jesus, can you explain the parable to us? Jesus, listen, I grew up in a Jewish, home and all this washing of my hands and being ceremonially clean and the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, like, I'm having a hard time trying to reconcile all this. Can you explain this? And Jesus sees the sincerity of Peter. And he says, sure. And he says, here's the deal. And he explains it. He says, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? In other words, it's just very simple. It's like it just goes into your body and out. It's a very natural process. It doesn't impact the very thing that's driving your words and driving your actions. And then Jesus continues and he says this. He says, but the things that come out of the mouth, look at this, this is so important, that come out of the mouth come from the heart. And the things that come from your heart, these are the things that put you at odds with God. These are the things that defile you. And then Jesus continues and he gives us examples of things that come out of the heart. And this is so important for us. He says, for out of the heart, out of this place inside of all of us come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander. And guys, these are the things that we look back on. These are the things that we think to ourselves, like, how could I have said this? Why would I have done this? These are the things that not only put us at odds with the people around us, but Jesus is teaching you and I the things, the source inside of us where these powerful emotions resonate are our hearts. And when we allow those powerful emotions to have power over us, it puts us at odds with God. And then Jesus wraps it all up. And he says, these are what defile you. But eating with unwashed hands, that does not defile you. That's simply a tradition. That's simply a ritual. So guys, where we're going over the next several weeks is together, we're going to begin to discover how to monitor our hearts, how to look at these powerful emotions and see them from a distance, how to look at these powerful emotions and begin to see what's behind these powerful emotions and what they're really all about. And ultimately, what we're going to discover over these next 4 weeks is we're going to take some very practical steps, and we're going to discover how each of us can have our Harley moment. The moment where we can step off this Harley, put our feet firmly on the floor, stand up tall, pull our shoulders back, and have the power to say to these emotions, you're not the boss of me. Anger, I see you for who you are. Anger, I see what's behind you. I see where you came from. I see how I have struggled with you for a long time. But anger, from this point forward, I want you to know, you are not the boss of me. Lust, I see you. I see what you're all about. And I see what you desire. And lust, I can see you from a distance. And lust, I want you to know, you are not the boss of me. And that's with every powerful emotion. And guys, just think about this for a second. Imagine this. Imagine if you had learned to monitor your heart. Imagine if you had learned to monitor your heart maybe in high school or in college or after college, and that was something you understood how to do and you did, like that was a habit in your life. Imagine the difference that would have made in your life. Imagine how you would look back on your high school years or look back on your college days. Imagine how much freer you would be today, imagine the difference it would have made if you had learned to monitor your heart. Or imagine the difference it would have made in your life if your father had learned to monitor his heart. If your father had learned to say that to that powerful emotion of anger, hey, you're not the boss of me. Imagine the difference that would have made in your life. Imagine the difference it would have made if your mom, who allowed the powerful emotion to have of fear to have power over her, imagine the difference it would have made in your life if she would have learned to monitor her heart. And imagine the difference it would make in your kids' lives if you could teach them how to monitor their heart. You know, something I do with my boys all the time is, I ask them this question. I go, how's your heart? How's your heart? And, every time I do that, they make fun of it. And they're like, oh, Dad, you're, wanting to talk about my heart again and this whole thing. But we have discussions about their heart, and I ask them questions. I'm like, hey, is there anything in there? Is there anything in your heart that maybe you don't want to talk about, but you should talk about? Is there anything that's happened to you that has really upset you? Is there anything you're angry about? Is there anything anybody said or did that you feel like you're carrying with you? Is there anything that's causing you and making it hard to sleep? Is there anything you're afraid of? In fact, just a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with Jonathan, my twin son, and if you tuned in a few weeks ago, you saw his top bunk with all his little stuffed animals and fuzzies. He's got 51 of them up there. I walked in one night and I was just tucking him in and I was just rubbing his little chest. And I said, hey, Jonathan, anything in your heart? Anything that anybody did to you? Anything that, you're afraid of? Anything keeping you up late at night? And Jonathan looked at me and said, Dad, I'm really having a hard time sleeping. And I said, well, what's that about? He said, I'm just afraid. I'm afraid that you and Mom, you're going to get COVID. And if you get the COVID, then you're going to die. And I'm going to be alone. And Jonathan and I had the opportunity to talk about what was in his heart. And we had the opportunity to talk about fear and what's behind his fear and that there's something even greater than his fear. And he had the opportunity to essentially say, hey, fear, you're not the boss of me. And guys, that is so incredibly powerful to help you and I take a step of freedom. And you and I take a step to something better. So that's where we're going over the next several weeks. Now, today, as we wrap up our time, I just want to give you something very simple and very practical. I want you to think in your personal life. This is for you. I want you to think about this question. What's the one emotion that desires to be the boss of you? What's the one emotion that continues to desire or feels like it continues or has the potential to have the power over you? What's that one emotion? What's the one emotion that if your wife was just brutally honest, she would say, that's the one emotion that has the potential to have the power over you? What's the one emotion your husband, if he was just brutally honest, could say, yeah, that's the one emotion that seems to have the power over you? What is that for you? And guys, whatever that is, part of taking a step to be free from these powerful emotions is being self-aware and being very honest to say, that's the one. And then here's what I want you to do. And I know this may sound kind of strange, but with whatever that powerful emotion that you identify is, then I want you to say out loud this week to that emotion, I want you to say, you're not the boss of me. Insecurity, listen, I see you. You're not the boss of me. Anger, I see you. No. You're not the boss of me. Hey, lust, I see. You're not the boss of me. And guys, this isn't like a simple fix kind of thing, but this is a first step. And there's so much more we're going to talk about. But today, this week, I want you to take this first step to become aware of what that emotion is. And then I want you to have the courage. And I know this may be awkward. Maybe this is something you just whisper, but I want you to say it out loud to whatever that emotion is. You're not the boss of me. And as we begin to do that, as we begin to take these steps, it's what begins to free us of these powerful emotions and ultimately lead us to something better. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for just this moment that we could have this kind of discussion and talk about something so real and ultimately very powerful in our lives. And Father, for all of us, we have these emotions. And I just pray this week that you open our minds and open our hearts to what is that one emotion. And then God, would you actually give us the courage to say out loud, you're not the boss of me. God, I trust you with that. Thank you for this moment. In Jesus' name, amen.
What a great start to this series. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel to stay up to date on everything going on at North Point. And I hope to see you at one of our Summer with North Point events. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on North Point Online.